I never thought a 40-acre livestock auction barn in rural Montana would turn me into the most hated man in Willow Creek Estates. But here we are, standing at the intersection of property rights and suburban entitlement. My name is Robert Jennings, and I have been running the biggest livestock auction operation in Madison County for the past 15 years. The barn sat on a sprawling piece of land just outside the city limits of Jennings, Montana, a town where ranching wasn't just a business but a way of life. Every Tuesday and Friday, ranchers from across 3 counties would bring their cattle, horses, sheep, and occasionally some exotic livestock to my auction house. The sound of hooves on concrete, the smell of hay and animals, the rhythmic cadence of my auctioneer calling out bids, that was the soundtrack of my life. Everything changed when Willow Creek Estates sprouted up like mushrooms after a rainstorm. Some developer from California bought up the land adjacent to my property and somehow convinced the County Planning Commission that Madison County needed luxury homes for wealthy retirees and remote workers fleeing the West Coast. Within 2 years, what used to be rolling grassland became a gated community of McMansions, each one more pretentious than the last. The houses started at $700,000, which in Montana terms meant these people had more money than sense. At first, the new neighbors seemed tolerable. They waved when they drove past on rural Route 47, the 2-lane road that connected their subdivision to downtown Jennings. A few even stopped by the auction barn out of curiosity, taking pictures of the horses like tourists. But that honeymoon period lasted exactly 4 months before Patricia Thornberry moved into the biggest house in Willow Creek Estates and assumed the role of Homeowners Association president. Patricia was everything you would imagine when someone says, HOA president. She was 52 years old, drove a white Lexus SUV, had that particular haircut where the back is shorter than the front, and wore athleisure wear despite never actually exercising. Her voice had that tone, the one that made every statement sound like a complaint and every question sound like an accusation. Within weeks of her arrival, complaints started flooding my phone. The first call came on a Friday morning in September. I was in the main auction hall, checking the livestock manifest for the afternoon sale when my cell phone rang. "Is this Robert Jennings?" Patricia's voice came through like nails on a chalkboard, speaking. "What can I do for you?" "This is Patricia Thornberry, president of the Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association. I am calling to inform you that your operation is creating unacceptable disturbances for our residents." I set down my clipboard and walked outside, away from the noise of the cattle being unloaded. "What kind of disturbances are we talking about? The smell, Mr. Jennings. The noise. The traffic. Our residents purchased homes in Willow Creek Estates with the expectation of peace and tranquility, not to live next to a barnyard." "Madam, with all due respect, my auction barn has been here for 15 years. Your neighborhood is new." "That is completely irrelevant. We have standards in Willow Creek Estates, and your facility is negatively impacting our property values. I am requesting that you cease operations immediately." I actually laughed. "You are requesting that I shut down my business because you built houses next to it. I am informing you that the Willow Creek Estates HOA will be taking action if you do not voluntarily comply." She hung up before I could respond. I stood there in the Montana sunshine, watching a rancher's truck pull up with a trailer full of Angus calves, and felt the first stirrings of what would become a year-long war. The second call came 3 days later, this time from the Madison County Zoning Office. Rita Henderson, the zoning administrator I had known for a decade, sounded apologetic when she explained that the HOA had filed a formal complaint alleging that my auction barn was operating outside its permitted use. "Robert, I have to investigate any complaint that comes in." "You know that," Rita said. "I will be out tomorrow to do an inspection, but between you and me, your permits are solid. You have been operating legally since 2009. The inspection took 4 hours. Rita went through every building, every permit, every piece of documentation. When she finished, she stood in my office and shook her head. "You are completely in compliance. I will file my report. The HOA does not have a case." That should have been the end of it, but Patricia Thornberry was nothing if not persistent. Over the next 2 months, the Willow Creek Estates HOA filed complaints with the County Health Department, the State Environmental Agency, the Montana Department of Livestock, and even the EPA. Each investigation came back the same. My operation was legitimate, properly permitted, and in full compliance with all regulations. Then Patricia changed tactics. In November, I received a certified letter from a law firm in Bozeman. The Willow Creek Estates HOA was filing a civil nuisance lawsuit against me, claiming that my auction barn constituted a private nuisance that substantially interfered with their use and enjoyment of their properties. They were seeking an injunction to shut down my business and monetary damages for the alleged decrease in their property values. I hired a lawyer, Marcus Powell, a rangy man in his 60s who had been practicing property law in Montana for 35 years. He read through the complaint and actually smiled. "Robert, this lawsuit is garbage. They do not have standing. You were here first, your operation is legal, and Montana has right to farm laws that protect agricultural operations from exactly this kind of thing. So what do I do? We file a motion to dismiss, and we countersue for frivolous litigation. This will never see a jury." Marcus was right, but that did not stop the HOA from making my life miserable while the legal process ground forward. Patricia organized protests outside my auction barn. Every Tuesday and Friday, a dozen Willow Creek residents would stand on the public right-of-way with signs that said things like, "Protect our property values," and "No farm animals in our neighborhood." They took videos of every truck that came and went, documenting the traffic. They filed noise complaints with the sheriff's office, even though my operation ended by 6 in the evening and never operated on weekends. The worst incident happened in January. I arrived at the auction barn one Tuesday morning to find that someone had spray-painted "Shut IT Down" across the main entrance gate. The sheriff's deputy who responded to my call was sympathetic but realistic. "Robert, unless you have video footage showing who did this, there is not much I can do. I will file a report, but vandalism cases like this rarely get solved." I installed security cameras after that, 24 of them covering every angle of the property. The harassment did not stop, but at least I had documentation. The preliminary hearing for the lawsuit happened in March at the Madison County Courthouse. Judge Harrison Wick, a stern man in his 70s who had grown up on a ranch himself, listened to both sides for exactly 90 minutes before ruling from the bench. The plaintiff's complaint is without merit. Mr. Jennings operates a lawful agricultural business on property zoned for such use. The fact that the plaintiffs chose to build residential housing adjacent to an existing agricultural operation does not give them the right to shut down that operation. Motion to dismiss is granted. The court also finds that this lawsuit was filed without reasonable basis and awards attorney's fees to the defendant. This matter is closed. I should have felt victorious, but Patricia's expression as she left the courtroom told me this was far from over. The next escalation came in April, when the Willow Creek Estates, HOA, petitioned Madison County to rezone my property from agricultural to residential. They claimed that the area had become predominantly residential and that my auction barn was a non-conforming use that should be phased out. The public hearing was packed with Willow Creek residents, all of them testifying about how my operation had ruined their quality of life. But the ranching community showed up too. 40 ranchers, many of them third and fourth generation Montana families, filled the county commission chambers and spoke about how critical my auction barn was to the local agricultural economy. Marcus presented evidence showing that agricultural use was still the predominant land use in the area, that Willow Creek Estates was the anomaly, not my operation. The county commission voted 4-1 to deny the rezoning petition. Patricia stormed out of the hearing without a word. 2 weeks later, the Willow Creek Estates HOA filed an emergency petition with the Montana Department of Environmental Quality, alleging that runoff from my property was polluting a creek that ran through their neighborhood. It was a complete fabrication. I had invested over $60,000 in water management systems, detention ponds, and erosion control specifically to prevent any environmental impact. The DEQ investigation took 6 weeks and concluded that there was no pollution, no violation, and no basis for the complaint. That is when Patricia made her biggest mistake. She showed up at my auction barn on a Friday afternoon in May, accompanied by 2 other HOA board members, and demanded entry to inspect my facilities. I was in the middle of running an auction, with 200 people in the stands and 50 head of cattle in the pens. "Madam, this is private property and I am in the middle of conducting business. You need to leave. We have a right to see what kind of operation you are running here, Mr. Jennings. Our residents deserve transparency. You have no right to be here. Leave now or I will call the sheriff." Patricia pulled out her phone and started recording, walking toward the auction hall. "I am documenting the conditions here for our legal case." I stepped in front of her. "There is no legal case. The judge dismissed your lawsuit. You are trespassing." One of the HOA board members, a bald man named Gregory something, grabbed my arm. "You cannot stop us from entering." That was when Jake Morrison, a rancher who had been selling cattle that afternoon, intervened. Jake was 6'4", 240 pounds of muscle from a lifetime of ranch work. He stepped between us and said very calmly, "The man asked you to leave, so leave." Patricia tried to push past him. Jake did not move. The standoff lasted maybe 30 seconds before Patricia finally retreated to her Lexus, shouting threats about lawsuits and harassment charges. I called the sheriff anyway and filed a formal trespassing complaint. The deputy who responded explained that he would document the incident, but that prosecution was unlikely unless they returned. "You need to be careful, Robert," the deputy warned. "People like this, they don't stop, they escalate." He was right. In June, the HOA changed tactics entirely. Instead of targeting my business directly, they went after my customers. Patricia and her board members started showing up on auction days with cameras, recording the license plates of every vehicle that entered my property. Then they started contacting the ranchers directly, sending them letters warning that they were contributing to a nuisance and could potentially be named as co-defendants in future litigation. It was harassment, pure and simple, but it was effective. 3 ranchers called me to say they would be taking their business elsewhere, too worried about legal entanglement to continue using my auction house. I understood their position, but watching my customer base shrink because of Patricia's vindictive campaign made my blood boil. Then in July, everything changed. The Willow Creek Estates HOA did something so brazen, so legally questionable that it shifted the entire dynamic of our conflict. I received a registered letter from the HOA's law firm informing me that the Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association was invoking a rarely used provision in Montana law that allowed HOAs to petition the county for enforcement of covenants and restrictions against properties within their zone of impact. They were claiming that even though my property was not part of their subdivision, it fell within a radius that gave them standing to enforce certain standards. Marcus read the letter and threw it on his desk. "This is insane. There is no such provision. They are making this up." "So what do they want?" "They are demanding that you cease all livestock auction activities, remove all animals from the property within 30 days, and convert the facility to a use compatible with residential zoning. If you refuse, they are threatening to seek an emergency injunction." "Can they do that?" "No, but they can keep filing motions and tying you up in court. Robert, these people have money and they are willing to burn through it to make your life hell. At some point, you have to consider whether fighting this is worth the cost." I looked out the window of Marcus's office at the mountains in the distance, the same mountains my grandfather had looked at when he first came to Montana in 1947. "I am not selling. I am not shutting down. If they want a war, they can have one." Marcus sighed. "Then we need to get creative." That night, I went home to my cabin on the north edge of my property and did something I rarely did. I opened a bottle of whiskey and sat on the porch, thinking. The auction barn was not just my business. It was my identity, my contribution to the community, my legacy. But Patricia and her HOA had resources I could not match. They could file frivolous lawsuit after frivolous lawsuit, complaint after complaint, slowly bleeding me dry even if they never won. I needed leverage. I needed something that would make them think twice about continuing their campaign. I needed to hit them where it hurt. That is when I remembered the bridge. Willow Creek Estates was geographically isolated in a way that most subdivisions were not. The development sat on a peninsula of land between two branches of the Madison River. The only access to the neighborhood was via rural Route 47, which crossed a narrow bridge over the west branch of the river. That bridge, known locally as the Saddlehorn Bridge, was the only way in or out of Willow Creek Estates. Without it, residents would have to drive 23 miles out of their way to reach Jennings, turning a 5-minute commute into a 40-minute ordeal. I had driven over the Saddlehorn Bridge 10,000 times without giving it a second thought. But that night, sitting on my porch, I started wondering who actually owned it. The next morning, I drove to the Madison County Assessor's office and requested property records for the Saddlehorn Bridge. What I discovered was stranger than I expected. The bridge had been built in 1963 by a local rancher named Theodore Harper to access his grazing land on both sides of the river. When Theodore died in 1998, his estate had been divided among his children, and the land had been sold off in parcels over the following years. But the bridge itself, according to the property records, had never been formally transferred to the county. It remained private property, technically owned by Theodore Harper's estate. I called Marcus from my truck. "I need you to research something for me. The Saddlehorn Bridge, who owns it?" It took Marcus 3 days to untangle the legal history. Theodore Harper's estate had gone through probate in 1999, and the executor had assumed that the bridge would be transferred to the county as part of a standard infrastructure handover. But that transfer had never been finalized. The paperwork had been filed but never approved by the county commission. In the confusion of dividing Theodore's assets among 7 children and 12 grandchildren, the bridge had fallen through the cracks. Legally, it was still part of the Harper estate, which had been formally dissolved in 2002 after all assets were distributed. "So who owns it now?" I asked Marcus. "Technically, nobody. It is an orphaned asset. If someone were to file a claim with the county showing intent to maintain and operate the bridge, and if the county agreed to recognize that claim, they could potentially take ownership." "Could I do that?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Robert, what are you planning?" "I am planning to level the playing field. This is going to make you very unpopular." "I am already unpopular. At least this way I will have something to show for it." Marcus helped me file the paperwork. It required documenting the bridge's history, showing that it had been improperly handled during the estate settlement, and making a formal claim as an adjacent property owner with interest in maintaining the structure. I also had to demonstrate that I had the financial means to maintain the bridge, and that I was willing to assume liability for its operation. The county commission reviewed my claim at their August meeting. Patricia and the Willow Creek Estates, HOA, had no idea what I was doing until the commission agenda was published 3 days before the meeting. Then my phone started ringing nonstop. Patricia's voice was shrill with panic. "What do you think you are doing, Mr. Jennings?" "I am claiming ownership of an abandoned private bridge. It has nothing to do with you. That bridge is the only access to our neighborhood. You cannot own it. Actually, according to Montana property law, I can. See you at the commission meeting." The county commission chambers were standing room only on August 15th. Every resident of Willow Creek Estates seemed to be there, along with reporters from the Bozeman Daily Chronicle and the Billings Gazette. Patricia sat in the front row, flanked by her lawyers, glaring at me with undisguised hatred. Marcus presented our case methodically. The bridge had never been properly transferred to public ownership. It remained a private asset. I was an adjacent property owner with legitimate interest in the bridge and the resources to maintain it. Montana law allowed for such claims in cases of orphaned infrastructure. Patricia's lawyers argued that the bridge served a public purpose, that it had been used as a public thoroughfare for decades, and that allowing private ownership would be a travesty. But they could not overcome the basic legal reality. The bridge was private property and always had been. The county commission debated for 2 hours. Finally, the chairman called for a vote. The commission voted 3-2 to recognize my claim to the Saddlehorn Bridge, subject to certain conditions. I would be responsible for all maintenance and liability. I would have to post appropriate insurance. And I would have to comply with all state and federal regulations regarding private bridges used for public access. That last phrase was key. Private bridges used for public access. Because the bridge was private, I had the right to control who used it and under what conditions, as long as I did not create an illegal blockade or interfere with emergency services. I now owned the only bridge connecting Willow Creek Estates to the town of Jennings. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Patricia confronted me in the parking lot as I was leaving the courthouse. "You cannot do this. You cannot hold our neighborhood hostage." "I am not holding anyone hostage. I am simply claiming what is legally mine. We will fight this. We will sue you. We will have this decision overturned. You have been fighting me for a year, Patricia. How has that worked out for you?" I drove home that night feeling something I had not felt in months. Hope. Not hope that Patricia would back down. I knew her well enough by now to know that would never happen. But hope that I finally had leverage, a way to make her think twice about continuing her war against my auction barn. The next morning, I hired a contractor to install a gate at the entrance to the Saddlehorn Bridge on the south side, the Willow Creek Estates side. The gate was simple, just a motorized arm like you would see at a parking garage controlled by an electronic keypad. I also installed signs. Private bridge, property of Robert Jennings, authorized users only. Then I sent a letter to every resident of Willow Creek Estates. The letter was polite and straightforward. I explained that I was the new owner of the Saddlehorn Bridge and that I was implementing a toll system to cover maintenance costs. The toll would be $5 per crossing, payable via electronic account. However, I was offering a special exemption. Any Willow Creek resident who signed a statement agreeing not to support HOA actions against my auction barn would receive free, unlimited access. The statement was simple. I, the undersigned, affirm that I do not support efforts by the Willow Creek Estates HOA to shut down or restrict the operations of the Jennings livestock auction. I acknowledge that agricultural operations are a legitimate use of rural land, and that Robert Jennings has the right to operate his business without harassment. Within 48 hours, I received signed statements from 37 of the 82 households in Willow Creek Estates. Apparently, not everyone shared Patricia's obsession with destroying my business. Many residents were retirees who had moved to Montana specifically for the rural character and had no problem with a livestock auction barn. Others were just pragmatic people who did not want to pay $5 every time they drove to town. Patricia, of course, refused to sign. So did the other HOA board members and about 40 households who remained loyal to her crusade. They paid the toll, but they paid it with venomous resentment. The local media had a field day with the story. Rancher buys bridge in HOA dispute was the headline in the Bozeman paper. Montana Public Radio did a segment about property rights and HOA overreach. I even got a call from a producer at a national news network asking if I would be willing to be interviewed. I declined. This was not about publicity. This was about survival. Patricia filed an emergency lawsuit seeking to block me from restricting access to the bridge. She claimed I was creating a public hazard and interfering with residents' property rights. The case went before Judge Wick again, the same judge who had dismissed the HOA's original nuisance lawsuit. Judge Wick listened to Patricia's lawyers argue for an hour, then turned to me. "Mr. Jennings, are you allowing emergency vehicles to cross the bridge without restriction?" "Yes, Your Honor. Fire, ambulance, and police have unrestricted access at all times." "Are you blocking anyone from using the bridge?" "No, Your Honor." "I am charging a toll, but anyone can cross if they pay or if they qualify for the exemption." "And the toll is how much?" $5 per crossing. Judge Wick looked at Patricia's lawyers. "Gentlemen, your client has been harassing Mr. Jennings for over a year, attempting to shut down his lawful business through frivolous complaints and litigation. Mr. Jennings has now acquired ownership of a private bridge through legitimate legal means and is operating it in accordance with Montana law. I see no basis for an injunction." Motion denied. Patricia stood up. "Your Honor, this is extortion." Judge Wick's expression hardened. "Miss Thornberry, I suggest you be very careful with your language in my courtroom. Mr. Jennings is not extorting anyone. He is exercising his property rights, the same property rights your HOA has been trying to deny him for the past year. If you do not like paying a toll, perhaps you should consider ceasing your campaign against his auction barn. Court is adjourned." That should have been the end of it. Patricia had lost every legal battle. The county supported my ownership of the bridge. Public opinion, at least in the agricultural community, was solidly on my side. Any reasonable person would have backed down, but Patricia Thornberry was not a reasonable person. In September, Someone cut the lock on the bridge gate and damaged the control mechanism, causing it to malfunction. The vandalism happened at night, and despite my security cameras, the perpetrator wore dark clothing and kept their face covered. I filed a police report, but the Madison County Sheriff's Office was stretched thin and could not dedicate significant resources to investigating property damage. I repaired the gate and upgraded the security system. Then, I installed additional cameras with night vision and motion-activated lighting. The message was clear. I was not going away. The toll system was actually profitable. The 45 households that refused to sign my statement were paying $10 a day in tolls, $5 to leave in the morning, and $5 to return in the evening. That was $300 per day, over $9,000 per month. I used the money to upgrade my auction barns facilities, installing new livestock pens and improving the drainage system. Every improvement was a reminder to Patricia that her campaign was not working. In October, the Willow Creek Estates HOA held a special meeting to discuss the bridge situation. I was not invited, but one of the residents who had signed my statement attended and later told me what happened. Patricia proposed that the HOA collectively purchase the bridge from me. She had obtained an appraisal suggesting the bridge was worth approximately $150,000 and proposed that each household contribute $2,000 to a fund to buy it. The proposal failed spectacularly. More than half the residents refused to contribute, arguing that they had already signed my statement and had free access. Others pointed out that even if the HOA bought the bridge, they would still be living next to my auction barn, so what was the point? A few residents openly accused Patricia of wasting HOA resources on a personal vendetta. The meeting apparently ended with Patricia shouting at her own board members and threatening to resign. She did not resign, but 3 of the 5 board members did, leaving the HOA barely functional. That is when things took a darker turn. In November, I started receiving threatening phone calls. The voice was always disguised, either electronically altered or speaking through a cloth or something similar. The messages were vague but menacing. You should watch your back. Accidents happen on rural properties. You will regret this. I reported the calls to the sheriff, but without a way to identify the caller, there was little they could do except increase patrols near my property. I also hired a private security company to monitor the auction barn at night. The cost was significant, but my safety was worth it. Then, in late November, one of my barns caught fire. I was home when I got the call from the security company at 2 in the morning. By the time I arrived, the volunteer fire department from Jennings was already on scene, battling the blaze. The barn was a total loss, along with several $1,000s worth of equipment stored inside. Fortunately, no animals were in the barn at the time. The fire marshal's investigation concluded that the fire had been deliberately set. Someone had poured accelerant along the base of the barn's south wall and ignited it. The arson investigator from the Montana State Fire Marshal's office spent 3 days on my property, collecting evidence and interviewing potential witnesses. Mr. Jennings, do you have any idea who might want to harm you or your property? The investigator asked. I told him about the year-long conflict with the Willow Creek Estates HOA, about Patricia's threats and the harassment campaign, about the vandalism and threatening phone calls. He took copious notes and said he would follow up. 2 weeks later, the investigator called me. Mr. Jennings, we have identified a suspect. Patricia Thornberry's son, Dennis Thornberry, age 28, was seen on your security footage near the barn on the night of the fire. We have a warrant for his arrest. Dennis Thornberry was arrested at his mother's house in Willow Creek Estates on December 3rd. The sheriff's deputies found clothing in his room that matched what the security footage showed, along with a gas can that forensic analysis later confirmed contained the same type of accelerant used in the fire. Dennis initially denied everything, but when confronted with the evidence, he broke down and confessed. According to Dennis's statement to the police, Patricia had not directly ordered him to set the fire, but she had spent months complaining about me, calling me every name imaginable, saying that I was ruining her life and the neighborhood. Dennis, who had a history of minor legal troubles and substance abuse issues, decided to help his mother by destroying my barn. He thought it would scare me into selling the bridge and leaving the area. Dennis was charged with first-degree arson, a felony carrying up to 20 years in prison and a $50,000 fine under Montana law. He posted bail and was released pending trial, but the damage to Patricia's reputation was immediate and catastrophic. The residents of Willow Creek Estates were appalled. The 3 remaining HOA board members called an emergency meeting and voted unanimously to remove Patricia as president. She refused to accept the decision and threatened to sue the HOA itself, but by that point, her support had evaporated completely. Even the residents who had backed her campaign against my auction barn wanted nothing to do with someone whose son had committed arson. The new HOA board, led by a retired engineer named Thomas Whitmore, reached out to me in January. Thomas was one of the residents who had signed my statement back in August, and he had never supported Patricia's crusade. "Mr. Jennings, I want to apologize on behalf of Willow Creek Estates for everything that has happened over the past year and a half. Patricia Thornberry's behavior was unacceptable, and the HOA should never have enabled her vendetta against your business. We want to find a way to move forward." We met at a coffee shop in uneasy, neutral territory. Thomas brought 2 other board members, both reasonable people who acknowledged that my auction barn was a legitimate business operating on properly zoned land. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "We want peace," Thomas said. "We are not asking you to shut down your operation. We are not asking you to change what you do. We are just asking if there is any way we can coexist without constant conflict." I thought about it for a long moment. The truth was, I did not want to be at war with my neighbors either. I had never wanted any of this. I just wanted to run my auction barn in peace. "I will tell you what," I said. "I will remove the toll on the bridge entirely. Everyone in Willow Creek Estates gets free access, no questions asked. In exchange, the HOA issues a formal statement acknowledging my right to operate my business and commits to not interfering with my operations in the future." Thomas smiled. "I think we can make that work." The agreement was formalized in February. The Willow Creek Estates HOA issued a public statement acknowledging that the Jennings livestock auction was a lawful agricultural operation, and that the HOA had no intention of challenging its existence. In return, I removed the toll gate from the bridge and granted all Willow Creek residents permanent free access. The statement also included an apology, not just from the HOA but from 30 individual residents who had participated in Patricia's harassment campaign. They acknowledged that their behavior had been inappropriate, and that they regretted the harm they had caused. Dennis Thornberry pleaded guilty to second-degree arson in March as part of a plea agreement. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison with 2 years suspended, meaning he would serve 3 years in Montana State Prison followed by probation. He was also ordered to pay restitution to me for the barn and equipment he had destroyed, a total of $47,000. Patricia Thornberry left Willow Creek Estates in April. She sold her house at a loss, unable to bear the stigma of her son's crime and her own humiliation. I heard through the local rumor mill that she moved to Arizona, where presumably she would find another HOA to terrorize. As for me, I kept running my livestock auction barn. Business actually improved after the conflict ended. The publicity, while stressful at the time, had brought attention to my operation from ranchers across Montana and even into Wyoming and Idaho. My Tuesday and Friday auctions were packed, and I ended up hiring 2 additional employees to handle the increased volume. I still own the Saddlehorn Bridge. It remains private property, but I never reinstated the toll system. The bridge serves its original purpose, connecting people and facilitating commerce, just as Theodore Harper intended when he built it 60 years ago. On warm evenings, I sometimes stand on that bridge and look out at the Madison River flowing beneath, the mountains rising in the distance, and the lights of Willow Creek Estates twinkling on the far side. The view reminds me that this place, this land, this life, is worth fighting for. Not with arson or harassment or legal bullying, but with persistence and principle, and the stubborn belief that people who work hard and follow the law deserve to be left in peace. The Willow Creek Estates, HOA, never bothered me again. The new board even invited me to their annual neighborhood barbecue, which I politely declined. I have no interest in socializing with my former antagonists, but I appreciate the gesture. It suggests that they finally understand what I tried to tell Patricia from the beginning. We can coexist. We can be neighbors without being enemies. We can respect each other's property rights and way of life without demanding that everyone conform to the same suburban vision. Montana is big enough for both livestock auctions and gated communities, for working ranches and luxury homes, for people like me who measure success in cattle sold and land preserved, and people like the Willow Creek residents who measure it in property values and manicured lawns. The mistake Patricia made was thinking that only one vision could survive, that my existence somehow negated hers. The truth is more complicated and more beautiful than that. The truth is that diversity, real diversity of land use and lifestyle and values, makes a community stronger, not weaker. The ranchers need the auction barn to sell their livestock. The auction barn needs the ranchers to supply inventory. The town of Jennings needs both the agricultural economy and the wealthy retirees who shop at local businesses and pay property taxes. And yes, even the Willow Creek Estates residents, whether they admit it or not, benefit from living near working ranches and agricultural operations, because those operations preserve the open space and rural character that attracted them to Montana in the first place. I learned a lot during that 1.5 years of conflict. I learned that people will go to extraordinary lengths to protect what they perceive as their territory, even when their claims have no legal or moral basis. I learned that HOAs can be weaponized by individuals with personal agendas, transforming neighborhood governance into persecution. I learned that the legal system, while slow and expensive, does eventually vindicate those who follow the rules and document their case. But I also learned that leverage matters. If I had not discovered the bridge, if I had not claimed ownership at exactly the right moment, Patricia's campaign might have succeeded through sheer attrition. She had money, time, and fanatical determination. I had the law on my side, but the law alone might not have been enough. The bridge gave me something Patricia could not ignore, could not dismiss, could not overcome with frivolous lawsuits and county complaints. It gave me power, and power, in the end, was the only language she understood. I do not regret buying the bridge. I do not regret installing the toll gate or refusing to back down. Some people criticized my tactics, saying I was as bad as Patricia, that I was holding the neighborhood hostage. But those critics did not understand the situation. I never started this fight. I never filed a single complaint against Willow Creek Estates. I never protested outside their homes or harassed their families or vandalized their property. All I did was defend what was mine using the tools available to me. The bridge was leverage, yes, but it was also justice. For 15 years, I had operated my auction barn legally, paying my taxes, employing local people, contributing to the agricultural economy that sustained Madison County. Patricia moved in and immediately tried to erase me, to rewrite the landscape to suit her preferences. The bridge was my way of saying no, my way of asserting that I had just as much right to be there as she did, my way of proving that property rights cut both ways. In the end, the conflict resolved not because Patricia had a change of heart, but because her support crumbled, and her son committed a crime that exposed the real consequences of her rhetoric. Dennis setting that fire was a tragedy for everyone involved, himself most of all. But it was also the inevitable result of months of dehumanizing me, of treating my livelihood as disposable, of framing our disagreement as a moral crusade rather than a property dispute. I hope Dennis gets the help he needs in prison. I hope when he is released, he finds a better path than blind loyalty to his mother's vendettas. I hope Patricia, wherever she is in Arizona, has learned something from this experience, though I doubt it. People like her rarely do. They just find new targets, new battles, new causes to justify their need for control. As for the Willow Creek Estates residents who remain, most of them are fine neighbors now. We wave when we pass each other on rural Route 47. A few have even stopped by the auction barn, not to complain but out of genuine curiosity, asking questions about the livestock and the ranching life. Those conversations give me hope that understanding is possible, that people from different worlds can find common ground if they approach each other with good faith and open minds. My auction barn is thriving. The land is paid off. The buildings are maintained. The business is profitable and sustainable. Every Tuesday and Friday, ranchers bring their livestock, buyers place their bids, and the ancient rhythm of agricultural commerce continues as it has for centuries, adapted to modern times but fundamentally unchanged. And the Saddlehorn Bridge stands strong over the Madison River, a reminder that sometimes the only way to stop a bully is to acquire leverage they cannot ignore, to fight not with their tactics of harassment and intimidation, but with the quiet, implacable assertion of your rights under law. The bridge is not a weapon. It is a statement. It says, I was here first, I belong here. And I am not going anywhere. That message, more than any lawsuit or county ruling or judge's decision, is what finally ended the conflict. Patricia understood leverage. She understood power. And when I demonstrated that I had both, when I showed her that I could make her life inconvenient in exactly the way she had been making mine intolerable, she finally backed down. Not gracefully, not willingly, but inevitably. The bridge taught me that sometimes survival is not about being right or having the law on your side, though those things matter. Sometimes survival is about making yourself too expensive to fight, too complicated to defeat, too embedded in the landscape to erase. The auction barn is my legacy, but the bridge is my fortress, the moat that keeps the barbarians at bay. I do not know what the future holds for Willow Creek Estates or for my relationship with its residents. I hope we continue to coexist peacefully. I hope the new HOA board maintains its commitment to non-interference. I hope no one else moves in with Patricia's sense of entitlement and determination to impose their vision on everyone around them. But if they do, If some future HOA president decides to resurrect the campaign against my auction barn, they will find that I am still here, still operating, still holding the deed to the Saddlehorn Bridge. And they will learn the same lesson Patricia learned, that the rancher who built his life on 40 acres of Montana land is not someone you can intimidate, manipulate, or drive away with complaints and lawsuits and petty harassment. This land is mine. This business is mine. This bridge is mine. And I will defend all three with every legal tool at my disposal, not because I am vindictive or power-hungry, but because some things are worth fighting for. My livelihood is worth fighting for. My community's agricultural heritage is worth fighting for. The principle that you cannot simply bulldoze someone else's life because it does not fit your aesthetic preferences is worth fighting for. Patricia Thornberry tried to destroy me and failed. Her son committed arson and went to prison. The HOA that enabled her campaign collapsed and reformed. And through it all, the Jennings livestock auction endured, not because I was stronger or smarter or richer than my opponents, but because I understood something fundamental about conflict. Leverage is everything. The bridge gave me leverage. The law gave me legitimacy. The ranching community gave me support, and my own stubborn refusal to surrender gave me endurance. Together, those elements were enough to outlast a HOA president who thought she could reshape reality through sheer force of will and an endless budget for lawyers. She was wrong. And the bridge, standing solid over the Madison River, carrying traffic in and out of Willow Creek Estates every day, is the monument to her failure and my survival. It is not the monument I would have chosen. I would have preferred to simply run my auction barn in peace, without conflict or drama or year-long legal battles. But life rarely offers us the challenges we prefer. It offers us the challenges we get, and our character is revealed in how we respond. I responded by buying a bridge. I responded by refusing to quit. I responded by defending my rights with the same determination Patricia brought to attacking them, and in the end, that was enough. The Jennings livestock auction continues. The Saddlehorn Bridge stands. And the Montana landscape, vast and beautiful and indifferent to human squabbles, endures as it always has, reminding us that we are all just temporary stewards of the land, and the best we can do is treat it, and each other, with respect. That is the lesson I hope people take from this story, not just in Willow Creek Estates, but everywhere that growth and change create conflict between old ways and new visions. We do not have to destroy each other. We do not have to choose between agriculture and development, between ranching and retirement communities, between the Montana that was and the Montana that is becoming. We can find ways to coexist, to preserve what matters while welcoming what is new, to honor property rights on all sides without turning every disagreement into a war. But coexistence requires respect, and respect requires recognizing that other people's livelihoods, traditions, and ways of life have value even if they do not align with your preferences. Patricia never learned that lesson. Her son paid the price for her failure. And now, hopefully, the residents of Willow Creek Estates understand what I tried to tell them from the beginning. The auction barn was here first, operates legally, serves a vital community function, and deserves to exist just as much as their luxury homes do. The bridge stands as a reminder of that truth, a physical manifestation of the balance of power that must exist in any healthy community. Not power wielded to destroy or dominate, but power held in reserve, acknowledged by all parties, serving as the foundation for mutual respect and peaceful coexistence. That is my story. That is how a HOA tried to ban my livestock auction barn, and how I bought the only bridge connecting their neighborhood to town. It is a story about property rights and small-town politics, about agricultural heritage and suburban expansion, about conflict and resolution, and the complicated dynamics of power in rural America. But mostly, it is a story about one man who refused to quit, who found leverage when he needed it most, and who proved that sometimes the best defense is a good bridge.